On a sunny morning at SeaWorld San Diego, a seasoned trainer stepped into the water with two of the park's most powerful orcas. What started as a routine session quickly turned into a fight for survival. No one saw it coming, but the consequences would change everything. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking, true story behind the attack that shook the marine world. On a bright July morning in 2002, SeaWorld San Diego seemed like any other peaceful day. But beneath the polished performances and cheerful smiles, a hidden tension lingered, one that only those closest to the whales could sense. Tamarie Tollison, at 28 years old, was no ordinary trainer. She was a senior orca trainer, a respected figure trusted by her colleagues and admired by many. Years of dedication had honed her into an expert in understanding the mysterious behaviors of these colossal marine mammals. For the casual visitor, the orcas at Shamu Stadium appeared as majestic giants. Massive, unpredictable, and distant creatures performing spectacular shows. But to Tamarie, they were far more than performers. They were individuals with distinct personalities, moods, and wills. She had spent countless hours not just training but connecting, learning the subtle cues that only years of observation could reveal, especially with two particular whales, Orchid and Splash. Orchid, born in captivity at SeaWorld in 1988, carried the weight of experience and intelligence. Known for her quick learning and assertive nature, she was both respected and feared. Splash, a powerful male transferred from SeaWorld San Antonio, was an impressive figure himself, but his history was complicated, marked by moments of unpredictability and resistance. Tamarie had forged close bonds with both whales, approaching them not with fear but with respect and understanding. Her calm confidence and firm control made her a model trainer, someone who truly believed in the bond between human and animal. She understood that trust was a two-way street. The whales trusted her as much as she trusted them. Yet behind the polished routines and friendly facades, there were hushed conversations among trainers, whispers of caution and unspoken warnings about Orchid's behavior. Incidents had occurred before, moments when the whale tested boundaries, reminding everyone of the immense power they lived alongside. No serious injuries had been made public, but the risk was always there, an unyielding undercurrent beneath the spectacle. That Monday morning, Tamarie walked the familiar concrete path toward Shamu Stadium, ready for a routine day. The park was still quiet before the gates opened and preparations buzzed softly in the background. Orchid and Splash swam with elegant ease in the back pools, their large bodies cutting through the water with practiced grace. The day's session was planned as basic reinforcement. Bond building, trust exercises, no audience interaction yet. Orchid, now 14, was dominant and smart, but carried a stubborn streak that kept trainers alert. She had even once yanked a trainer's ponytail, a stark reminder of the power she wielded. Splash, larger but gentler by comparison, brought his own challenges from past unpredictability. As Tamarie slipped into the water, the routine felt safe and familiar. Radios clicked with calm voices, trainers held cue boards, and the controlled environment seemed steady. But beneath the surface, something was beginning to shift, something subtle and almost invisible. A change in movement, a shift in posture or gaze. Small signs only the most experienced might detect. Yet, even those signs would prove too faint, too late to prevent what unfolded next. As Tamarie floated beside Orchid, signaling softly, the massive whale responded with her usual gentle exhale. The water shimmered with the practiced rhythm of their connection. But then, in a sudden motion that was neither angry nor tentative, Orchid clamped her powerful jaws onto Tamarie's foot. The shock was instant and brutal. Tamarie's steady moments before was yanked downward with a force impossible to resist. Over 5,000 pounds pulling her under. Panic erupted on deck as radios crackled and trainers shouted. Without warning, Splash surged upward from below like a torpedo, joining the assault, each whale pulling Tamarie in different directions. Her body twisted helplessly beneath the churning surface, disappearing into the rippling blue as the frantic calls for recall echoed uselessly. Tamarie struggled desperately, trying to break free, her screams muffled by water. Below, she was surrounded by immense gray muscle and shadow, her oxygen running out, limbs flailing in a desperate bid for air. Tamarie scrambled to distract the whales with buzzers, slaps, and food lures, but the pool had turned into a whirlpool of chaos. For 30 agonizing seconds, Tamarie Tollison vanished beneath the iconic stadium's water, and it seemed as though she might never surface again. Then, a critical choice was made. From the pool deck, a senior trainer reached for one of the last remaining tools, a false signal. The call was for Kasatka, the matriarch orca, who, though not present, symbolized dominance and control. This psychological cue was a sound the whales had been trained to associate with submission and obedience. At that moment, the signal pierced the chaos. Orchid released first, followed by Splash. Tamarie's limp, twisted form bobbed to the surface, motionless for a heartbeat before she moved again. She gasped sharply as she was pulled from the water, coughing violently, her eyes wide but unfocused. Though alive, Tamarie was barely conscious, her body battered and broken. Trainers rushed forward with stretchers and backboards, urgently yanking her from the pool with the desperate care of people who knew every second counted. As she was lifted onto the deck, the full horror of her injuries came into focus. Her arm was shattered in a compound fracture, bone jutting through torn skin. Her foot was crushed and mangled. Bruises and bite marks streaked across her torso like a grim map of the violent encounter. Despite the trauma, she remained conscious, barely able to speak, yet alert enough to sense the panic swirling around her. The chaos was thick, the air heavy with shock and disbelief. Guests lingering near backstage froze in stunned silence behind safety rails. Some would later say they didn't fully comprehend what they'd witnessed. Others swore they'd never forget the blood smeared across the concrete floor as Tamarie was rushed past them toward emergency medical care. But even though she was free from the water, the danger was far from over. Her body had survived, but the consequences of the attack were only beginning to unfold. Would she ever walk again? Could she ever return to the water? And what would SeaWorld do in the wake of this nightmare? In the days and weeks to come, those questions would darken, growing heavier with each passing moment. Rushed to a nearby hospital, Tamarie arrived with traumatic injuries that stunned the medical staff. Her forearm shattered, torn ligaments, deep bruising, and lacerations from the orca's powerful jaws. The surgical team fought tirelessly to stabilize her, inserting pins to set broken bones and working to preserve as much function as possible. Her crushed foot was bandaged, pain managed by heavy sedation as she drifted in and out of consciousness. But while she lay in that sterile hospital bed, another battle raged beyond the operating rooms. Inside the offices of SeaWorld's management, the conversation shifted quickly, from concern for what had happened to controlling what could be said. According to public reports, internal meetings focused on damage control, carefully crafting language that would downplay the attack. Was this an animal aggression incident? Or, as some executives quietly suggested, the result of a trainer error? It was a familiar tactic in marine parks across the country. Shift blame, minimize exposure, protect the brand at all costs. Official statements painted the injury as occurring during a routine training session, omitting the terrifying details of being dragged underwater, ignoring that 2 whales had attacked, and erasing the critical emergency recall signal that had ultimately saved Tamarie's life. Behind the polished press releases and rehearsed smiles, the truth was being sanitized, scrubbed clean of anything that might harm SeaWorld's carefully curated image. But why was this about protecting Tamarie's safety or the park's reputation? If similar incidents had occurred before, how many had been swept under the rug? As Tamarie fought to recover, SeaWorld moved swiftly to bury the story, keeping warning signs hidden beneath layers of silence and corporate denial. As days passed, whispers began to surface. Orchid, the very orca who had attacked Tamarie, had a documented history of aggression toward trainers. Born at SeaWorld in 1988, Orchid's troubling behavior was no secret to insiders. In 1996, she had grabbed a trainer by the ponytail and dragged them into the water, an incident that resulted in no major injuries, but sent a clear warning. This was a strong, dominant animal, not always compliant. Internal reports later made public revealed multiple red flags involving both Orchid and Splash, times when the whales ignored cues, acted unpredictably, or displayed irritation during routine sessions. These were not rare glitches, but a documented pattern of risky behavior. Whistleblowers who came forward years later described a culture of pressure where raising safety concerns meant risking their jobs. Trainers who spoke up were quietly reassigned or silenced. The show had to go on, the illusion maintained at all costs. More damning were internal memos labeling Orchid and Splash as high risk for in-water interactions. These were not just challenging animals, they were known liabilities. Yet they remained in the rotation, and Tamarie was sent into the water with them anyway. Was it overconfidence, negligence, or something darker? Tamarie Tollison's attack was not an isolated accident, but the latest incident in a long line of near misses. She wasn't the first trainer pulled under by an orca, but she was the one who survived to tell the tale. Her survival forced SeaWorld to confront questions it had long avoided. Tamarie's road to recovery began immediately after surgery at a San Diego trauma center. Doctors labored for hours to repair her compound fracture, stabilize nerve damage, and set her on the path to healing. Pins and stitches restored her broken arm, but the damage ran deep beneath the surface. Over the following weeks, she endured grueling physical rehabilitation, relearning how to use her arm, regaining strength in her leg, and wrestling with the trauma that had nearly claimed her life. Swimming, diving, trusting, once second nature, now carried the weight of painful memory. Tamarie never spoke publicly about the attack. She gave no interviews and made no announcements. Quietly, without fanfare, she never returned to waterwork with orcas. Her colleagues at SeaWorld San Diego never forgot what happened. Behind closed doors, many admitted that day changed everything. One trainer said, "We all knew it could have been worse, and that scared us." Another recalled watching Tamarie pulled from the water limp and bloodied, thinking, "That could have been any one of us." But as Tamarie's body healed, her life was forever altered. How do you return to the water when the animals you once called family nearly ended your life? And perhaps more haunting, what do you do when the world moves on, but you remain trapped in silence? Tamarie gave no public statement, no memoir, no media tour, but her absence spoke volumes. Yet the whales remained. Orchid and Splash continued to perform, their presence woven into the fabric of the show. Orchid, the very orca who had clamped her jaws on Tamarie's foot and dragged her underwater, stayed in the rotation. Her routines were modified, but her role never diminished. To the public, she was simply another graceful, strong star of the Shamu show, obedient, majestic, untouchable. But insiders knew the truth. Behind the scenes, internal documents surfaced through media investigations, exposing a troubling reality. Despite repeated warnings and behavioral incidents, SeaWorld kept Orchid performing, ignoring the dangers until the inevitable happened again. She kept showing aggressive behaviors even before July 2002. Yet this attack on Tamarie was the most severe on record at SeaWorld San Diego. It wasn't an isolated incident. Still, the public never received a formal announcement. No press release ever detailed how a trainer had nearly lost her life. Splash, the other whale involved that day, continued training alongside the team for several more years. When he was eventually retired from waterwork, it wasn't because of any disciplinary action or behavioral issues. Instead, SeaWorld cited age and health concerns as the reason, carefully omitting his involvement in the attack from public discourse. In the days following the incident, the official statement from SeaWorld described the event as a training accident. The language was deliberate, vague, carefully crafted to avoid any hint of aggression or danger. There was no mention of the emergency recall signals, no acknowledgement that two massive whales had dragged a senior trainer beneath the surface for nearly 30 seconds. The public was reassured that nothing unusual had occurred. Yet inside the training rooms, behind closed doors, everything had changed. The whales that once inspired awe and wonder carried a shadow now, a reminder of the unseen risks lurking just beneath the surface. Trainers grew more cautious, their confidence tempered by a quiet, unspoken fear. The haunting question of, what if it happens again, lingered like a ghost over every session. The orcas remained in their pools, the shows continued, but the illusion of safety had vanished. Tamarie's silence only deepened the mystery. If the whales continued performing while the trainer disappeared from public view, what was SeaWorld really trying to protect? And at what cost did this silence come? In the days after the attack, a brief news segment aired on local television. A trainer had been injured during a routine session, the report stated, and was now recovering. There were no images of the scene, no interviews with those involved, and no mention of the orcas by name. The message was tightly controlled. SeaWorld's corporate team moved swiftly to shape the narrative, reminding employees of strict non-disclosure agreements that barred them from speaking to the media about internal incidents. Any questions about the attack were met with a rehearsed response: "We do not comment on internal safety matters." Though the story faded from public headlines, it never truly disappeared. Years later, as public scrutiny of marine mammal captivity intensified, Tamarie's attack quietly resurfaced in the spotlight. The 2013 documentary Blackfish exposed the psychological toll captivity exacts on orcas and the hidden dangers faced by their trainers. Tamarie's name appeared not through her own words, for she remained silent, but through public documents, behavioral logs, and trainer testimonies that pieced together a disturbing pattern of risk and neglect. Her near-death experience was not an anomaly. It was part of a painful history of trainers placed in harm's way and told to smile through it all. Her silence spoke volumes. She never granted interviews or returned to the public eye, yet her absence, her injuries, and the stark reality of that July day helped ignite a movement demanding accountability. Behind every carefully choreographed orca trick and every smiling trainer was a hidden risk no one wanted to confront. Until now, Tamarie's story forced people to ask, what else has been buried? How many more stories like hers remain untold? Though the attack nearly claimed Tamarie's life, her survival quietly reshaped the industry. Initially, little changed publicly. Orchid remained a show regular, Splash still swam in the tanks, and Tamarie's story slipped into the shadows. But behind the scenes, cracks began to form in SeaWorld's carefully maintained facade. Then, in February 2010, tragedy struck again. Senior trainer Dawn Brancho was killed by the Orca Tillacum at SeaWorld Orlando during a live performance. This time, the story could not be hidden. Public outcry was immediate and fierce. Headlines blared across the nation, forcing federal regulators to intervene. SeaWorld was ordered to overhaul its safety protocols. Water work with orcas was permanently banned. Trainers were no longer allowed to enter the pools during shows. Platforms were raised, barriers installed, and procedures rewritten. The risk, once ignored, was now impossible to deny. And though Tamarie never returned to the water, her story remained at the heart of these changes. She had been pulled under, silenced, but never forgotten. Her name appeared in every internal report, every risk assessment, every closed-door meeting that followed. For some, she became a symbol of survival, a stark reminder of how close the system came to failing its people completely. She was neither the first nor the last victim, but her survival became a warning no one could ignore. Even today, Tamarie Tollison's legacy echoes through the halls of SeaWorld, a sobering testament to the perilous balance between human ambition and the untamed wild beneath the waves. Tamarie Tollison survived an ordeal that few could imagine, an attack by animals she trusted and cared for deeply. But her story is more than just a terrifying event. It's a wake-up call. It reminds us that wild animals, no matter how familiar they seem, carry instincts we must respect. The silent warnings, the hidden dangers, the pressure to perform, they all paint a complex picture of captivity and risk. As we move forward, it's crucial we raise awareness about the true nature of wildlife and advocate for safer, more ethical interactions. Protecting these majestic creatures means understanding them, not controlling them. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can foster respect and caution that keeps both humans and animals safe. Let's honor Tamarie's experience by committing to a future where trust doesn't come at such a high cost.